Hi boys and girls, this is Mrs. Rains. I'm doing this video so that you can have access to the lesson during the week at home. I will be posting this on Google Classroom so that you'll have access to it in class and at home. And so hopefully this will help you understand the words a little bit better throughout the next couple of weeks as we're working with this sort. Okay, so we're working with sort 2, again, continuing our conversation from last week talking about prefixes. Remember, prefixes go before the base word. And so our prefixes this week that we have are pre, for, post, and after. All right, so pre actually means before. For also means before. And that's pretty easy to remember because that word for is in before. Post means after. And then, of course, after also means after. So those are our 4 categories. So 2 of them mean before and 2 of them mean after. So as you're going through your word sorts, I want you to think about the meanings of the words, and hopefully these prefixes and their meanings will help you be able to figure out the word meanings as well. Right now at this time, I want you to go ahead and look at your words that you have this week, the 24 words, and I want you to underline all of the prefixes in your word sorts. So go ahead and pause this video. When you're done with underlining your prefixes, then you can come back and replay this lesson. But go ahead and just underline the prefixes and then you can continue the lesson. Okay. So after you've underlined your prefixes, we're going to go ahead and get started with our words and what they mean. So for our first category, pre, which means before, the word we have is prepare. Okay, so that's our first word. Prepare means to get ready beforehand, to do something before in preparation. Our next word we have is predict. So again, we mean that we're making a prediction or we're going to tell something that is going to happen before it actually happens. Next word we have is preface. I know it looks like we would say preface, but it's actually pronounced preface. So this is actually an introduction, kind of like setting a purpose of a story or a book. So you'll see this at the beginning before the story actually starts to kind of set the setting, to set the tone or the purpose of the story. And usually it's written by the author or the editor of the book. Next word we have is prehistoric. Prehistoric means before recorded history. So before we actually have like a history book about this part of our story and time, that's what prehistoric means. So before history. So usually like dinosaurs would be like that prehistoric time or cavemen. So that's prehistoric. The next word we have is proceed. Proceed. And that means to go or to come before something or someone. So if you're preceding somebody in line, that means that you're standing in front of them in line. The next word we have is prefix. That should be easy to remember because that's what we're talking about. So prefix, of course, it's a word or an attachment that goes in front of the base word. And it also changes the meaning of the word. So it fixes the word to a different meaning. All right, so the next word we have is preseason. Preseason, I like to think I think about baseball when I think about this word. So I think about baseball season. And then so before baseball season starts, they usually practice preseason. So a lot of times you can go to a preseason game and that would be like a game before the season actually starts. The next word we have is preposition. We could also say preposition. So like we could pre-position something ahead of time beforehand. Or this word also is a part of speech, like in sentences. So when we're talking about nouns or pronouns, it's a word that would go before a noun or a pronoun. Next word we have is pre-war. pre-war basically is exactly how it sounds. It means before the war. So if we're talking about World War II, and so we mentioned the time period pre-war, so that would be before the war started. The next category is the for category, and so it again means before. So the word that we're going to start with is foretell. I didn't spell it correctly. Foretell. And so foretell means to tell before, to predict something that is going to happen before it happens. The next word we have is foreman. So foreman is like, obviously if you break apart the word, it means before a man. So somebody who is in charge of men. So like usually it's a working crew, and then the foreman would be in charge of the crew. Next word we have is forward. Okay, so forward, it's not like walking forward. This one means something different. So forward is basically like in a book, it's before the story starts, and usually it's a part or like a letter or an introduction to the story that's written by somebody other than the author. So not the author. The author does not write the foreword. It's somebody else who writes the foreword to kind of introduce the story or give credit to the story. The next word we have is forefathers. And forefathers means like the fathers before us. So like our ancestors, a lot of times we say our forefathers when we're talking about like George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. So those would be like our ancestors in history and time, our forefathers. The next word we have is foresight. Foresight would be the ability to predict something or the action of predicting something that will happen in the future. Or if, like, let's say if you foresight that you needed something before, you actually saw that you needed something, that would be a foresight. So it's very similar to predicting. Actually, it does mean predicting. So the next word we have is forethought. Forethought is to think of something beforehand. So if you have a thought before that you might need to grab your pencil pouch before you start an assignment, that would be a forethought, that you thought of that before you actually started your assignment. Okay. The next category we're going to work with is post, and that means after. The first word we're going to start with in post is postpone. So this word means to put off until later. So if you have to postpone something, that means that you're canceling it until a later date. Next word we have is post-war. So again, that's very similar to pre-war, which we talked about over here in the before category, except for this means after the war. So post-war and then after war. The next word we have is post-season. So again, very similar meaning, except for it's the exact opposite of pre-season. But we can kind of remember those two are opposites of one another. So if we're talking about baseball season, we know that, pre-season is before the actual season starts. Post-season would be after the season. Next one would be post-date. So this one's in reference, again, to time, talking about, today's date, what the date is today. So a post date would be after today's date. So a lot of times letters, we think about letters with post dates. A lot of times letters will have dates written up at the top. And so a post date would be a date written on the letter after it was written. Next category we have is after. And so our next word is after afternoon. So afternoon would be, of course, after the noon hour. So that noon hour is 12 o'clock. So that would be after 12 o'clock p.m. The next word we have is afterward. So we have a lot of opposite meanings in this word list that we have. So afterward is, again, the opposite meaning of forward. So if forward means before the story, afterward means after the story. So this is found in a book, and it's basically a concluding section of the book, and usually, again, it's not by the author. So that's the afterword. So it's the end, or at the very end of the book. The next word we have is afterthought. So an afterthought would be more like a reflection, where you're thinking about something after it had already happened. So maybe you're thinking about a test that you took and you're having an afterthought about it, and you're thinking, oh, you know what, maybe I should have changed my answer to this instead. That would have been an afterthought. Next word we have is aftertaste. This word means to have a taste in your mouth after you've eaten something. So a lot of times it's in reference to very strong spices like garlic or onion. If you eat something that has that flavor or that strong spice, you'll usually have a very strong aftertaste in your mouth, where you can still taste that garlic or you can still taste that onion. Okay, so these are our words that we're going to be working with. So you can use this to help you with the word meaning. You can play this video as many times as you need to so that you understand the words. And if you have any questions, please ask me. Our test will be on September 14th. That's a Friday. And we will be doing our vocabulary test then and our spelling test. The spelling test will be on all 24 words. And the vocabulary will be 10 random words that I will pick. You will not know in advance what words those are, so you do need to know what all those words mean. And then don't forget to do your homework as well. The homework will also be due on Friday, September 14th. All right, boys and girls, thank you very much. Bye.